Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into the material you shared today, and it revolves around, well, what seems like a really simple question.
It does seem simple on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah, who's your hero? But as the sources show, this actually stops a lot of people in their tracks.
It's fascinating. The insights, they're largely from Joseph Lavant's work, and he really points out how surprisingly tough this is for many people to answer, authentically.
You'd think it'd be straightforward, right? Someone you look up to who inspires you.
Mm-hmm.
But the material suggests finding someone who truly embodies your ideals, especially a real living person that feels like a real challenge these days.
Yeah, there's this observation about negative examples, bad role models seeming almost more common, or at least more visible, than genuinely positive ones.
Which sort of sets up what we're doing here in this deep dive, doesn't it?
Exactly. We want to explore the patterns, the implications that kind of bubble up when people are asked this question, based specifically on these observations from the source material.
Okay, so let's unpack what the author actually found. It starts with that initial point. People really struggle to name heroes, especially contemporary real figures.
Right. That difficulty in finding those, positive, tangible role models today, it's the starting point.
So to explore this, the author describes asking, what was it, about 100 high school students?
Yeah, secondary school students.
Yeah.
Ask them to name their hero and, importantly, why they chose that person or figure.
And this is where it starts getting really interesting, the results from these students.
They were quite revealing. Get this. 1 in 4, so a quarter of them, named their mother.
Okay.
But only 1 in 7 chose their father.
Wow, okay. That's a noticeable difference right there.
It is. And then over half, they pick someone else entirely, a public figure, maybe a fictional character, another relative, a friend, or even God.
And what about, didn't some choose themselves?
Yes, a small group, about 5%, said, myself.
Right, and the rest.
The rest just didn't have a hero, couldn't name one.
But the really fascinating part, for me anyway, was the correlation the material draws out next.
Ah, yes, the link to academic performance.
Exactly. It found that fully half of the students who named a parent or another immediate family member as their hero were getting A's or B's in school.
Right. Now compare that. Compare that to the kids who didn't choose a family member. Only 1 in 7 of that group was earning A's or B's.
That's a pretty stark difference.
It really is.
So what's the interpretation offered in the source for this? How did the author explain it?
Well, the idea put forward is quite powerful, actually. It suggests that having that direct personal connection with someone you admire, it might create this sense of obligation, maybe, or a motivation to make them proud.
Which you just can't get from a distant figure like a sports hero you've never met or, I don't know, a character from a movie.
Exactly. That kind of reciprocal relationship isn't there. And the students who name themselves, the interpretation is they're driven by their own standards, their own sort of internal hero.
The material is careful to point out, though, this wasn't like a rigorous scientific study.
No, definitely not. But the author says it paints an interesting picture. And it does.
It certainly does. And it brings up something that comes up again later, doesn't it? This observation that there seems to be a problem with fathers.
Yes, that phrase is used.
Yeah.
And the numbers, well, they seem to back that up, at least in terms of being named as heroes in these groups.
So speaking of other groups, the author then asked the same question, but to a different set of people.
Right, a group of about 50 adults, mixed ages this time.
And their reaction.
Pretty similar, actually, that same kind of pause, a moment of silence as they really grappled with the question.
Interesting. And their answers. Did the patterns hold?
Broadly, yes. Fewer superheroes mentioned, which you might expect with adults.
Sure.
But again, about a quarter chose their mother. And again, significantly fewer chose their father. That pattern was consistent.
So the mother hero preference holds across age groups here.
It seems so in this material. Now, for this adult group, the author didn't look at success correlation in the same way. Most had families, so they asked a different follow-up question.
What was that?
They asked, who would your own children choose as a hero?
Ooh, that's a tough one. How did they react?
Apparently, another moment of uneasy silence. It clearly hit a nerves,
Yeah.
maybe made them think about their own impact, their own role modeling.
Yeah, I can imagine. It connects back to that broader point the material raises about a, quote, serious lack of living heroes these days.
Right. And it even muses on whether this is, a modern problem or maybe it's always been kind of difficult to find those real-life heroes.
And this lack, especially for adolescents, the source suggests it can have real consequences, doesn't it?
It does. It highlights potential impacts like lacking direction, maybe lower self-esteem, struggling in school, being more vulnerable to negative influences.
Now, it's not saying that if you don't have a hero, you're doomed or anything.
No, not at all. But it makes a strong argument that positive role models are really helpful. They build confidence. They show you how to navigate challenges, how to overcome things.
There's that story in the material, that really poignant one about the 16-year-old kid.
Oh, yeah. The one who said he was joining the army.
Yeah, but with absolutely no enthusiasm. And when asked why he didn't seem excited, he just said something like, well, that's all there is for someone like me.
It hits hard, doesn't it?
It really does.
And the author reflects on that. Like, how does someone so young get to that point? And wonders, who was his hero? Did he even have one? It really highlights that potential void we're talking about.
So it brings us right back to that question we started with, the one the material explored. For you listening, have you identified someone who genuinely inspires you?
But the material doesn't just leave it there, does it? It offers this really powerful twist at the end.
Right, flipping the question completely.
Yeah. Asking yourself, are you anyone's hero? Could you be a role model for someone?
And the definition of hero used here is, I think, really important. It's not about, saving the world or grand gestures.
No, it's much more grounded. It's simply about having a lasting, positive influence on other people, especially kids.
There's that quote included from the author's father, which is lovely.
Oh, yes. Our greatest aspiration in life should be to touch the hearts and minds of others in a positive way. Something like that.
Beautiful. And the source makes the point that there are just countless ways to do that. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Exactly. Sometimes it says just, simply being present and showing the best of ourselves is more than enough.
So we've kind of journeyed through this source material, haven't we? From looking at who people actually name as heroes, those surprising patterns.
The mother-father difference, the link to academic success.
Right. And then thinking about the impact or lack of role models, and finally that challenge to consider if we could be that positive influence.
We saw how that direct connection to a hero, especially in the family, seemed linked to good outcomes, maybe because you want to make them proud.
And we felt that slight discomfort when adults were asked if their own kids would see them as heroes.
Yeah. So given all these patterns we've discussed, from the sources, the impact of having a connected hero, the apparent difficulty many have finding one. Here's the final thought we want to leave you with.
What does it really mean, thinking about all this, to consider if you are right now, or if you could maybe intentionally become that kind of lasting positive influence for someone else?
How might thinking about that possibility actually shape what you do?